Here's this guy who's more than likely or not going to win the world championship again this year. And he's fighting for third place as if it's the championship finale with the title fight in the balance, right? I mean, that's how much he wanted third place. And that gave us a great insight, I think, into the heart and soul of Max Verstappen. Every time you see a Yuki Tsunoda with fans waving at him and cheering him or whatever he's got, or bodyguards, or not necessarily just him, but maybe Kevin Magnussen. Every time a guy like Liam Lawson sees that, he thinks, yes, now I'm going to go in and do my job. I'll let him deal with all that rubbish. I'm going to just go and blow him away on the track. Drivers come and go at Ferrari. And I think if you start hiring a driver because you want to enhance your brand and increase the value of the shares, then that is the wrong reason to be signing a racing driver.
So a lot of people are pointing the finger at FIA and saying, typical FIA, consistently inconsistent, only institute the rules across all related parties when it suits them. What do you say to that? Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me, as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest F1 mind to have ever goated. Thou shalt put some respect on his name, Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well, Cameron. Thank you very much. Yeah, a few late nights, but here we are.
And how do you feel about that, Peter? Because I always hear British biased media complaining, you know what I mean? I was complaining over the weekend, streaming and doing all this stuff. Yeah, other people all over the world have to deal with this, like 20 races out of 24. Do you know what I mean? How do you, do we moan too much over in this side of the world about the timing of F1 races, Peter?
Oh, well, you obviously haven't been watching the Peter Windsor YouTube channel for 100 years, Cameron, because years ago I said to solve the problem of all these time changes, as Formula One has to be seen to be this globe-trotting thing around the world, we should indeed take up another of Bernie's initiatives, which is to have half the races in Europe and half the races somewhere else, and just give them different brands and different country names, as we did with the Swiss Grand Prix at Dijon, France, all those years ago. And we've had the European Grand Prix when it could have been the German Grand Prix. And actually to have, and as we saw during COVID, actually having a couple of races at the same circuit is no problem, actually. It's all about the show, and it's all about racing, and it's all about making sure people can watch it conveniently. And yes, Formula One, a bit like you've got to design and build your own car in order even to enter the championship. It's got this thing about we have to be seen to be globetrotting around the world. But I believe the time will come, probably years from now, when the carbon footprint, and I know that there's massive amount of work being done on that, but I think the carbon footprint will dictate that more races will have to take place in one region.
Oh, chaos, Mr. Windsor. Go on then, should we talk about some F1-age? Are there some F1 threads at which, Mr. Windsor, we need to pull? As is customary, tell me what you think was the biggest story to come out of the US Grand Prix weekend just past.
That you can have a very nicely grouped and numbered choir without any musical backing at all, and it'll sound perfect these days without it echoing through the grandstands and hearing any feedback. I thought that moment when we had the American anthem sung by that choir was absolutely wonderful, and all credit to Liberty for pulling that off. My only regret is they didn't have Sting then coming in and singing something again, just completely on a classic guitar, just doing Roxanne or something would have been quite cool. But apart from that, no, I digress, obviously. I don't know. My question to you, Cameron, I think we need to start is, how must Toto Wolff be feeling this morning? I mean, it's difficult to list all the things that went wrong for Mercedes this weekend, isn't it? And I think that's the expression that you would have made when you saw Lewis going off, right?
Yeah, mate, Peter, it's just been what could go wrong did go wrong. It was bonkers all over the shop, and then Mercedes, they looked like they had a quick car for
I know, and same corner as George. So it's a terrible car in terms of giving the drivers any sort of feedback for what they can do, and that is, despite what people say about other parts of the lap, for me that is the most demanding and most impressive corner in Kota, because it's got a high speed approach. They approach it in seventh gear, and and they're looking at it for quite a long time. And there's a lot can go wrong there with the camber change going in. And you'd imagine a number of things. You imagine after George had his shunt that Lewis would have completely debriefed him to see exactly what happened. I don't know whether he did or he didn't. Secondly, obviously the sweet spot on the Mercedes is still absolutely on a knife edge, and they can get a lap out of it. A George Russell super quick soft tire lap out of it, and probably a Lewis lap if he's not getting a yellow. But in terms of heavy load of fuel, bottoming out, we had that lurid spin on Friday with Lewis when he bottomed out. And here it's probably what happened again. I was a little bit surprised that he said afterwards it was a gust of wind, probably a gust of wind, and they were measuring all this wind. To me, that's too much information. And it needs to be seen alongside how good Lewis has been over the years at adapting to crosswinds and all those variables. That is what Lewis Hamilton is all about. And whether it's a different deal now that he's in the middle of the pack and, well, the back of the pack actually, and as he was in Austin, and the whole thing is just given all the different components that we've just talked about, the small sweet spot of the car, it just was all too much, even for Lewis Hamilton. I think that's what we need to say.
Absolutely, and
And
Toto.
it's pretty, and then we had the whole thing with George and the Parc Ferme and Spa and
Oh,
George and
there.
what is going on there? And they failed to get Adrian Newey. If Adrian's going to leave Red Bull to go anywhere, you would imagine he should go to Mercedes. That's what the Mercedes board would be expecting, I would have thought. But he's not. They didn't pull that off either.
1,000% on Newey, but he never fancied Toto Wolff, did he? Very different personalities, and I think Toto
Yeah.
has, I don't know why, but Toto has a lot of confidence in his existing technical and operational managerial team, right? Which is again debatable, Peter. But go on, talk about Lewis very quickly, because Toto said of that incident when asked to apportion blame, that it was 0% Lewis and it was 100% the car, that the car's far too knife edgy. And you could see it right on George Russell's onboards. You could see him like soaring at the steering wheel on every single combined end. Like they were just struggling all over the shop. It felt like they'd taken far too much downforce out of the car. The drivability had gone to zero. But that meant conversely that all of a sudden they were rocket ships in the straight. Did they mess up that setup, Peter? Did they take too much downforce out the car, do you think?
They were pretty quick in a straight line. I don't know. I'm very nervous at saying that Mercedes have got enough downforce to be able to take it out of the car in the first place. So yeah, I mean, maybe they've got this rough edge of, the minute we add downforce, it gives us drag, and therefore we've got to be very careful in the amount of downforce we put into the car, which is probably not something they have to say to that extreme at, say, McLaren or Ferrari these days. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's a very simple way of looking at it. They had a lot of upgrades in Austin, and they took those upgrades as McLaren did. Obviously, those two teams had more upgrades than anyone else, apart from the sort of back of the grid. We're talking about the front runners. They took them to Austin, which is one thing after a break, but it's the first part of a triple header. We have no testing, and I'm wondering whether they just did too much, too many things, and just sort of trying to cover every hole as the water's sort of coming through all the different leaks in the boat. And look at Ferrari by contrast. Excuse me, Ferrari virtually no upgrades. It's the same. Obviously, they set the car up for Austin, and they did it very well, but they didn't panic. This is the difference between the Freddie Vasseur style of management and the Toto Wolff style of management. Freddie Vasseur is one guy out there who sniffs the air, who has racing in his blood, who has changed gear ratios at 3 a.m, probably in the paddock at Manicure years ago, just to get his car onto the grid. Formula 3, Formula 2, who's been through that, knows what racing is all about. It's all about simple things and getting those simple things in the right order. Whereas Toto Wolff comes from a commercial background. He's very corporate driven, very committee driven, very discussion driven. And as I said, I used the phrase earlier, too much information. Ferrari just got on with it. They've got two quick race drivers. They've got a pretty good car that they know that if they get that in the sweet spot, it's pretty good. It's going to be there or thereabouts. It's going to be a sort of podium finisher with a bit of luck. And that's how they went to Austin. And as it turned out, Red Bull were a little bit better, but not a lot better. McLaren probably overcomplicated themselves a little bit as well. And there's Ferrari breezing through the gap. Mercedes, all over the place. And Ferrari just go through and make everybody look like idiots.
Oof. Oof, absolutely. Before we get to Ferrari, though, Mr. Windsor, can I respectfully disagree with your biggest story to come out of this weekend? I think we've got to talk about Lando Norris. I feel like you sold me a dummy there. Lando Norris and Max Verstappen absolutely has to be the biggest talking point. The internet's gone. It's gone nuclear. Everybody
Well,
wants to
you know
know.
me, if everybody's driving down the motorway this way, I go the other way. That's how I live my life. That's why I've got no people around me where I am right now. It's really good.
Deliberately contrarian, Windsor, and I think that's why
Yeah.
we love you for
Now,
that.
obviously, I mean that I try not to state the obvious, but yeah, it was a big thing, wasn't it? And yeah, it was a great race in that respect. And Coda is a very good circuit for racing. For me, it's not a great circuit in terms of watching the drivers and what they do, but in terms of sort of bringing all the drivers together, and those that aren't absolutely brilliant can still look very good around Kota in a good car, and it provides lots of corners. The track's so wide in so many places, and it's got enough long straights and DRS for there to be lots of
Hmm.
wheel to wheel stuff. So that said, it's a good circuit for racing. It was obvious that Lewis was going to catch Max, and he was on newer tires. The McLaren obviously had more grip. The Red Bull was fading with tire deg, and it was obvious he's going to catch him. The big question in my mind, I think in a lot of people's mind, would he just go straight past, or would Max think that, wow, P3 is up for grabs here? I mean, that's a good point, isn't it, Cameron? I mean, here, before we get onto it all, here's this guy who's more than likely or not going to win the world championship again this year. And he's fighting for third place as if it's the championship finale with the title fight in the balance, right? I mean, that's how much he wanted third place. And that gave us a great insight, I think, into the heart and soul of Max Verstappen. And it wasn't anything to do with what we saw in 2021. This was unbelievably clean driving by Max. But I'm putting aside the incident at turn 12. But prior to that, he was absolutely superb in a car that was losing grip. I saw him lock up once, actually the lap before the incident. But the rest of it, he was just positioning the car perfectly. And you didn't see him looking in the mirrors, but obviously he's got unbelievable peripheral vision, because the millisecond that Lando moves, Max is responding, and just wonderful to watch that. And that was, that to me, that's much better than a million overtakes. What we saw there between Max and Lando. It's a little bit like Nigel and Ayrton at Monaco in '92, except, of course, there was no way Nigel was going to be able to overtake anywhere at Monaco, but it was a similar thing. And then we come to 12. The lap before, Lando's seen him lock up. He knows the front's going away. He gets a really good run coming out of 11, the hairpin, and he's got DRS, even though without DRS, he's probably a couple of clicks slower than Max. It's not significant. He's got the DRS. The question is, what's he going to do? Because every time Max just goes down the inside and protects it and brakes at the last possible moment. So he does anything conceivably reasonable, which is to go down the outside in the hope that Max might run wide and he can do an undercut and get him on the inside. But he puts himself in a position where if Max does run wide, he has no alternative but to run wide with him. Now, I think with respect to Lando, I think if Max had been driving the McLaren, I think he would have braked a little bit earlier, let Lando in the Red Bull slide a bit wide, and then done the undercut and got him on the inside coming out. But he didn't do that. He was on the outside because he had so much grip and he had so much more speed than Max. So he's on the outside. And then obviously to avoid a collision with Max, absolutely using all the road, as he's in my view entitled to do, he runs wide into the runoff area. Now, at this point, I mean, there's a lot of gray area still about if you try to pass somebody on the outside and the guy on the inside crashes into you, it's not your fault. We've seen that many times now. And Lando did the right thing. He avoided a collision. But it's very clear in the rules that if you do actually go off track and then you gain an advantage from that, regardless of whether it's your fault or when you've gone off track, you have to give that position back. That is very clear. There's a lot of other things that are not clear, but that is clear. And this is where I think it went wrong, because McLaren on the pit wall, instead of saying, yeah, you were ahead at the apex, there's no way, keep going. I think somebody there should have just said, right, should have had the bravery to say, right, back, give him the position. You're going to get him easily. His tires have gone off. You've got all the advantages. You're going to be P3, give back the position. Somebody should have said that, stopped all the discussion and let him do it. And guess what? At that point, McLaren could then have gone to the stewards and said, Max Verstappen should have a penalty for putting Lando off the road. And I think he might have got a penalty, actually. I think
Oh,
Max might have got a penalty had Lando given the position back. And I think that was a bad call by McLaren to fight it over the radio like that, even to the point where Oscar Piastri's engineer is saying to Oscar, Red Bull have told Max to go as quickly as possible. It's because they think he's going to get a penalty. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's just another example, I think, of McLaren not having having a strong position on the pit wall and making a good call. Because there's another position and points that Lando Norris has now lost. I'm 100% convinced he would have passed Max the following lap had he just given the position back in the same place, probably.
see, Peter, this is where respectfully again, sir, I've got to disagree. I'm convinced.
Okay, no, I'm sure you will. I'm sure everybody in the world disagrees with me. But that's what I think.
There's a lot to unpack in there, Peter. Let me deal with it in reverse chronological order. As far as Lando getting right, I thought Lando, apart from the start, again, this is like the third. He's 1 in 7 as far as times when he started on pole and got to the end of the first lap in first. So there's something in there that he's got to address. I feared for Lando the second that I saw that he'd parked his car in the pit box dead straight. I felt like Max Verstappen had given him the blueprint as to how you defend off of the pole. You assume a very aggressive defensive posture and point your car on pole at where the guy in second is. And at the instant that I saw Lando not do that, I knew he was going to have an issue. And at some point, he was going to be on the gearbox of Max Verstappen, and the chaos that ensued was always going to ensue. I think as far as McLaren.
Can I just argue that? Can I just respond to that?
Yeah, of course.
I think you're right. I mean, two things. Lando keeps getting the pole at the wrong circuits, to be honest. It doesn't give him a big enough advantage. Hungary, another good example. But I think a Monza, I suppose you could argue, second chicane, who would have thought that anyone would try to pass him there, let alone a teammate. But going back to Kota, the track is so wide going in to that corner. It's very difficult to say, where is the inside, where is the middle, where is the outside? Wherever you are, there's going to be room. I mean, if he'd gone absolutely down the middle, absolutely to the left, down the inside on the approach to the hairpin, there would have been dust and stuff all over the tyres. And Max would easily have gone around the outside of him. If he's in the center of the road, there's a chance somebody's going to go either side. It's too wide. To be honest with you, it's too wide. It's almost a childlike corner, a bit like the second hairpin as well. The entries are much too wide. Now, it all came from Michael Schumacher, who said, when they were designing the circuit, saying to Tilke, we've got to have really wide entries to have lots of overtaking. But, it's fairly, to me, that's a fairly, I don't know. Call me old school. I think the track should be narrower. And then, Lando would have led out of that first corner. I'm not saying it's not his fault, but I don't think he did much wrong myself. Anyway, please carry on.
Yeah, no, I think he's got to optimise for his chances. I think there was a way to defend. Max probably still would have got him on the switchback or whatever, but I just think Lando's a little bit green in the way that he races. It's almost like he takes a way to play himself into the he takes a bit of time, Peter, to play his way into the crease. Like Lando on lap 1, 2 and 3 isn't the Lando of lap 40 when all of a sudden...
but give Lando credit. He's unbelievably good.
He's brilliant.
He's unbelievably good at not being hit by other people.
Yeah.
How many people would have avoided the collision with Piastri in Hungary on the first corner? How many people would actually have avoided the incident with Max at the first corner in Kota? A lot of people. If that had been, I don't know, Gasly, Ocon, Tsunoda, Magnussen, probably George, maybe Sainz, for sure, Perez, it would have been a shunt for sure. Yeah. Lando's really good at making sure nobody hits his car. And that's what he was doing in the first couple of laps as well. He was just making sure with all this stuff going on, and he could see what was going on with Sainz. What was he going to do? He'd just sit there and watch and just wait and see what was going to happen. So I don't criticize him actually for anything he did in those early laps. Sorry, but carry on.
No, fair. Yeah. I get it. And he's worth your praise because he's a brilliant driver.
All right, let's get to turn 12 then.
All right then. So turn 12, I think... I think there's a blueprint. There's a way to approach Max Verstappen. I think the switchback will never work on Max Verstappen because he's like you said, his peripheral vision is crazy, and he's playing the cards that you deal him in real time. If he sees you going to set up the switchback, he's going to park it on the apex and completely kibosh that in real time. So I think,
Yeah, but sorry, so to do that, he's got to brake at exactly the right millisecond for the grip level of the tires. He's locked up the left front the previous lap.
yeah,
The tires are even degrading more the next lap. In order to get the car pointed at the apex, as you just said, he would have been so slow at that point that the position would have been there for the taking by Lando Norris. That's the point. It's not just the same car every lap. The car was getting slower and slower every
true,
lap,
true.
under pressure, under braking at that point, high speed braking. So that's another thing. That's why I say for sure Lando would have got him easily. And I tell you something else. If he'd given the position back to Max, there would also have been a slight essence of feeling of, wow, fair play here. And the next millisecond, I keep using that, but it would have been milliseconds that Lando did try to do the pass. There would have been this thought in the back of Max's mind that this guy's he's a fair guy. I'm not going to do anything stupid here because he's just given the position back to him, remember? So factor all that in.
Yeah, it's a good shout. It's a good shout. I just don't think. I think with the benefit of hindsight, I think lots of the community have said Lando should have given or not completely given the position. Give the position back in a way that's strategic. Make sure you do it into a DRS zone, so you get the DRS zone, and then you get. Do you know what I mean? All these other things. But I think
he should have done it going into the next corner.
I think it's. I don't know, Peter. I think people are talking with the benefit of hindsight.
Well, I'm not. I was shouting at the TV screen at the time, telling McLaren to tell him to give the position back. Instead of which they were saying the opposite to him.
Here's my theory.
At the time, I was saying that.
Let me pitch you on this, Peter, and tell me whether you're buying and selling my theory. I think Lando, the tyre offset was diminishing in real time because every lap that he does in that dirty air, the advantage does one of these right. It diminishes. He only had a few laps. Let's 3, 4, 5 maybe maximum. So I think Lando and McLaren, subconsciously or otherwise, they've done a cost-benefit calculation or risk-benefit calculation and clocked that they don't think Lando will get around Max Verstappen. So they're choosing the lesser of two evils. They're trying to fight. They're trying to pitch it at the FIA as opposed to overtake Max Verstappen again. Because I think they quite rightly think that Lando, if he gets back behind Max Verstappen with a couple of laps remaining, tyre offset diminishing in real time, so many laps in the dirty air of Max Verstappen, more than likely isn't going to get round Max Verstappen again. I think so.
I think you're totally wrong there, Cameron, with total respect, because Max's tyres were 6 laps older and the Red Bull's deg rate was much higher than the McLaren. So any dirty air stuff Lando was getting was relatively unimportant compared with the situation that Max was in. Max was in he was half a second a lap slower than Lando in free air. There's no way in the world Lando wouldn't have got him. Oof. No way. He probably would have got him into 1, actually, on the following 3 corners later had he given the position back.
Yeah.
He would have been all over him coming out of 18. And then 19, he would have been right on him. He would have been right. He would have been in DRS coming down the pit straight, and he would have got him into turn 1.
Oh, I see.
And I don't blame Lando. I don't blame Lando for this because it's a bit like Hungary. He's getting all this stuff going on in his head from the radio. Yeah. Instead of one person who should be saying to him, give the position back now. Stop all the chat on the radio. Get on with it. You're going to pass it. You're going to be P3, Lando. That's what should have happened. The problem is on the pit wall. It's not in Lando. It's on the pit wall. They don't have anybody. They don't have a Freddie Vasseur there who actually understands racing and can just get on with it.
I hear you, but let me play back what you said.
They don't need that at Red Bull, by the way, because they got Max Verstappen. There's a slight difference. But, Lando's a different guy. He's got other qualities, and that's fair enough. But they do need somebody who's got some gumption there.
Yeah, it's I'm
surprised Zach didn't do that, to be honest. I mean, Zach's a racer. I'm really surprised. Maybe he was. I don't know. And we didn't get to hear it. But I imagined I was going to hear Zach Brown's voice at any stage saying, everybody shut up, give the position back. We'll talk about it later. You're going to get him now, Lando. Go for it. Go, go, go. That's what should have happened.
Wow.
And he would have. I guarantee he would have.
So let me play back what you're saying, Peter. You're saying that the rate at which Max's tyres are degging towards the end of the race would have been greater than...
let me put an adjective. His older tyres, his 6-lap older tyres are degging as well. Even if the tyres were the same life cycle as Lando's,
Mm.
the Red Bull was putting a lot more energy through the tires than the McLaren. So and they were 6 laps older. And he had locked up, which is unusual for Max.
Yeah.
The tires are in real trouble when that's happening.
Blimey, it's
Yeah.
we'll be talking about this forever, Peter. I
Well,
think if to save a dying puppy, Peter, I would bet a lot of money if Lando gives back that place that he doesn't get another whiff of Max Verstappen, that he doesn't get round
yeah,
him.
we'll never know, obviously.
Mm.
We'll never know if he might have got the pole or Charles might have got the pole if George hadn't crashed. Lots of things we'll never know. All we can do is look at the evidence and look at the logic of it all. And the logic actually stems from the rules and the understanding of how the stewards operate.
Yeah,
And
right.
if they've already turned a blind eye to what Max did at turn one, just as they turned a blind eye to what Oscar did at turn one in Hungary, then the chances are that they're going to be stewards who are going to read the very, very small print of any regulation. And there's no doubt about the small print on that one. If you get an advantage when you're off track, you must give the position back. And
So
that's an unarguable thing. And that's why I keep saying it's not as if there was a grey area here where McLaren had to flip the coin and see which way to go. There was no grey area. Somebody should have had the gumption to say, no, this is a rule. Give the position back. We've got the better car. We're faster. We'll pass him. Give the guy encouragement. Okay, he may not have, but it still would have been the correct decision to give him the opportunity to pass him. And I trust Lando that he would have.
So here's where it gets very techy, Peter, because
Mm.
Toto Wolff looked at the fact that George got a penalty for his overtake on Bottas, as versus Max, who didn't get a penalty, and Toto instantly lead into bias was the turn of phrase that he used. He's not surprised that Max didn't get a penalty. The FIA, the insinuation being that the FIA have always been biased towards their prodigal son, one Maximilian Verstappen. What do you make of this? Because a lot of people have said in the community that, I mean, as an example, there was a Carlos Sainz tried to take Max by surprise, again, turn 12, and a very similar incident. Max kind of just ran off the track and gained an advantage by not losing a place to Carlos Sainz. So a lot of people are pointing the finger at FIA and saying, typical FIA, consistently inconsistent, only institute the rules across all related parties when it suits them. What do you say to that, Peter?
I do think there was bias towards Red Bull at Abu Dhabi 21. I don't think there's been any bias since. I think the rules are ridiculous and they're poorly worded as a result, but we shouldn't have them in the first place. And of course, therefore, there is massive inconsistency from one corner to another, from one incident to another, let alone from one race to another. And that will never change whilst we have unsatisfactory rules. And again, call me old school. The minute they started this whole thing about moving under braking and where you can overtake, and if you're on the outside, if you're on the inside and somebody's on your outside, you have to give him room and all this rubbish. That was when it was an open book then for inconsistency, for accusations of bias and corruption and all the other stuff we see. I don't believe any of it, and I think if Toto needs proof that there's no bias against Red Bull, they need to look at the way Piastri got away with turn one in Hungary, which was just as bad as anything we've seen this year, in my opinion. And it was only because of Lando's ability to get out of the way and then Max's ability to get out of the way that there was no massive multi-car shunt on the first lap there. And yeah, so there's an inconsistency straight away, nothing to do with Mercedes at that point. So, please advise. It's very easy from whatever position you're in. And obviously Toto Wolff's in a position of thinking he was robbed going back to Abu Dhabi 21. But then, what do you expect with these ridiculous rules and situations? And the radio then was different to now. You could get directly to to Michael Massey, and that's been changed, which is a good thing. But there's always going to be inconsistency, and there's always going to be misunderstandings and more than one interpretation of a rule anyway. And they're all racing drivers, and they all want to win. And I just think that what you need in that situation is strength and rigidity rather than waffling around trying to make committee decisions. And to me, we haven't seen it in action, but to me, Freddie Vasseur is that sort of guy. And I think it's a shame they just didn't get on the radio and say to Lando, give the position back, go and race him now.
Oh, Peter, I agree vehemently with everything you said apart from the very last stanza. I think
Well,
you're
yeah.
on.
Okay, I'll do a different last stanza then. And if we have lots of racing and there's lots of stuff going on, let them sort it out in the pit lane afterwards. Even better television, assuming American live feed isn't cut off as they take the checkered flag.
Unbelievable. Talk to me about that, Peter, because I think people watching the internationally syndicated Sky Sports F1 broadcast might not have been aware of what our North American friends across the other side of the pond had to deal with. What happened with
Well, I
that?
don't know, mate. All I can tell you is I was flooded with WhatsApp messages as the race was finishing, saying, "Oh, the feed's finished. What's going on?" Yeah, in America, North America, and I immediately said
Unbelievable.
there must be a football match on or something. And one guy said, "No, they're just showing rubbish. It's some soap opera on now. What's going on?"
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Continues seizing defeat from the jaws of victory, right? Like I
Well,
needed to come on, Liberty
yeah.
Media.
I
Be
don't know.
better.
Maybe there was some tech fault over the satellite or something there. Who knows? But it seemed odd that in the one time they got a race, not the one time, but they got a race there, one of three in their proper time zone in the United States, that they lost a lot of the stuff at that post race.
Absolutely. Talk to me about Lando Norris, because there was a lot of talk going into this Grand Prix. This feels like it's Lando Norris's maiden voyage as far as being able to compete in earnest for a championship over the course of 24 races. Helmut Marko said something to the effect that he questions Lando's ability to get it done in a championship because mentally he's weak. Zach Brown turned around and said, "Mate, what are you? Mental health is something that Lando Norris has been very open and honest about." And Red Bull, by saying something like that, having a very senior, a very senior member of the team say something like that, take F1 back 30 years by poo-pooing how important mental health is. What do you make of that, Peter? And what do you make of Lando Norris's readiness to compete with Max Verstappen over the course of 24 races for a championship? Do you think this is too soon for Lando?
No, no, I'm a massive Lando Norris fan, as probably a lot of people know by now. And I think he's got everything. He's very different from Max, and he's not a Max clone. He's not a Lewis clone. He's not a Charles Leclerc clone. He's Lando Norris, and he's got his own faults and he's got his own great attributes. Going back to the first point, yeah, I mean, of course, Zach is 100% correct there. And obviously Helmut Marko is coming over as a cantankerous old man living in a different age. But I think they should make allowances for that. I mean, Zach knows that Helmut's not exactly 21 years old and comes from a different social era. So make allowances for that. Be respectful. Equally, Marko, please be respectful of Lando Norris, because Lando was the guy that took turn 19 in sixth gear to get the pole. I didn't see Max Verstappen doing that. And
Oof.
I didn't see Marko commenting on that.
Yeah.
And he should have. He should have said, if you're going to criticize Lando Norris, it's one thing to say, maybe he's, he doesn't have quite the road dust of Max and he's not quite as tough. And it's another thing to say, but he is unbelievably good and stylish in the race car. Well, when you start, but I mean, having said that, I mean, to start talking about mental health in the context of a race driver's psychology and approach to his art is a slightly different. It's a slight mismatch, I think. I know that we're all very conscious of mental health and how important that is, but what Marco's actually getting at is, does he have the tiger, as Dennis Jenkinson used to call it, to race Max Verstappen wheel to wheel? When I've just said, he's not Max, but what he is, I think even slightly better than Max, he's unbelievably good at staying out of trouble and not being hit by people. That's a Nicky Lauda, Alan Prost quality that we should not take lightly.
Wow.
A and B, he's very creative, and C, he's incredibly calm and pure in the way he drives and races. I mean, that business of taking turn 19 and 6 on that pole lap, I thought was just astounding.
He's a brilliant driver, Peter.
Well, he is,
He is
and
very
people
good.
should start giving him credit for that.
He
I've been talking a lot about Piastri and how much he's been trying to work on his short corners, and he does take shorter corners. But as I said before, that's not something that's a huge advantage around Kota. And I think he's probably a bit confused by that. It was interesting to see that Max immediately grasped that and did, not only this year, but previous years. And there was very little short corner driving from Max at the weekend. Most of it was just pure break in a straight line, wide open entry, focus on the exits. That's what you have to do in all those corners at Kota, and he
Yeah,
was doing that beautifully. And in
absolutely.
fact, Lando was getting into the corners earlier than Max when you were watching them.
Mate, he
But
was
you don't see
absolutely.
that very often.
No, both of
That
them
just
are.
shows how good Max is at knowing the moment to do things from circuit to circuit, from lap to lap. Whereas I don't think the penny dropped with Oscar on that. And I think he was struggling to understand why he wasn't as quick as Lando, as he normally would be. And then he never really got around the problem.
Yeah, I suppose my excuse for Oscar Jack is that it's his sophomore season, right? This is, I mean, we're looking at him. I think most of the community are judging Oscar as if he's been as if he's been racing F1 cars like 6 or 7 years. This is like a year and 2/3. Like,
Yeah, but that's quite a long time. I mean, come on.
do you think so, Peter?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Jackie Stewart won his first Grand Prix in 65. When was his first race? 65, Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, Clay Regazzoni. So, no, no, no. Yeah, he's been around easily. And that's a lot of races as well. How many races is that? You
fair.
know,
That's more than
40
back in the.
races or something. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, no, no, he's been around long. I mean, that's just a sign of Oscar's. I think he was just confused in Kota. As I say, it's not a circuit where the little things Oscar can do with the car compared with Lando actually added up to anything.
Yeah.
And that's why we saw Carlos Sainz looking so good alongside Charles as well. I'm not detracting from Carlos, but it's a circuit which neutralizes the difference between the very great drivers and the almost great drivers.
Oof. Oof.
Not many
Well,
circuits do that, but Kota is one of them because of its wide entries mainly.
and prove positive of the fact, like you just mentioned, that Carlos was closer to Charles. Let's talk about Charles because I had a lot of messages over the weekend saying, Cameron, put some respect on Charles' name, take back all of your blaspheming and disparaging talk. Charles Leclerc is the truth. He's the next one. Talk to me about Charles Leclerc's drive, Peter. What was the gift?
Oh, absolutely superb. I mean, I've also been a Charles Leclerc fan for many, many years, and I've got the Prema T-shirt signed by Charles to prove it. And always loved his driving, always loved his approach, and I've loved his humanity. And I just, it all was just perfect, wasn't it? I think as I said in my preview to the race, Charles is in the perfect position to see what is going to happen between Max and Lando and make the right call into turn one because it's such a wide track. There's anywhere you can be. And he was just perfectly poised. The minute he saw Max starting to lose the grip at the front, he just zacked down the inside. He hadn't braked too late, had all the grip he needed, got the rotation at exactly the right moment, bang, gone. And then you got free air. Then you've got everybody else squabbling around, and Bob's your uncle. Then your only worry is tire deg, and he knows how to look after tires. We saw that at Monza,
Yeah.
and yeah, just wonderful drive, absolutely superb. Very good drive as well by Carlos Sainz in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. I mean, I can't imagine how disconcerting it must be in a modern Grand Prix car to have the smell of fuel in the cockpit, because that fuel is not good. Fuel smell is not good in terms of what it can mean. And you don't have it very often in a modern Grand Prix car. And luckily, I guess, something seemed to cure itself during the safety car period,
Yeah.
thanks to Lewis. And by the time they got going again, he was more or less okay. But at that point, I think he'd lost a little bit of momentum. And then, of course, he had to come in early to cover Max. And that obviously then didn't give him the optimum strategy for beating Charles Leclerc. And that's what we saw there. But in terms of eyeball to eyeball, lap for lap, on this circuit with those wide entries, I think Carlos was right up there with Charles, and he should deserve a lot of credit. And I still think, in many ways, the story of the year is how a guy like Carlos Sainz has driven as well as he has and has been the team player that he has, knowing that he's going to be sacked at the end of the year. I find that absolutely inhumane and extraordinary. I've been extolling the virtues of Freddie Vasseur for so long now, but this is one decision in which I have to say I totally disagree. Nothing about the choice of Lewis Hamilton. And I do get it that Freddie has raced many years with Lewis and loves Lewis and wants to have him in that car, and that Lewis will go well at Ferrari. All that's saying, and you can't blame Lewis for going there. But in order to do that, he's had to sack a guy who's the perfect team player, the perfect foil for Charles Leclerc. Very cool guy anyway. And he's doing a superb job for Ferrari. And I find that absolutely inconsolably sad, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. Bonotto said
I just hope that Perez continues to drive as badly as he is, and that finally the penny will drop, and that Williams will say, "Oh, we'll race Colapinto next year. You can have Carlos," and he goes to Red Bull. I mean, wouldn't that be a great ending to the year?
Can you imagine? Christian Horner will be ruining his decision at the moment not to sign Carlos Sainz Jr. Just quickly on the Ferrari thing, because Mattia Binotto said something similar about the signing of Lewis Hamilton. And this isn't to say, I don't think either one of us is saying that signing Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, is a bad decision, especially when you look at if you're a shareholder and you consider what the share price is doing and the symbiosis of brand Hamilton and brand Scuderia. Like it's a huge thing. But Binotto echoed your sentiments last week, Peter, saying that were he still in charge of Ferrari as team principal, that signing Lewis Hamilton isn't a decision that he would have made, that he would have stuck with Carlos and Charles. Interesting that, eh?
Yeah, yeah, and he's right, and I hope I'm correct. Obviously, I'm correct in saying what I feel, and that is what I feel. And you talk about the stakeholders and the brand and more money and the Lewis matching the Ferrari brand. Well, I think of Enzo Ferrari, Luigi Canetti, Nart taking on the Italian Auto Club, coming from nowhere, pulling that deal off in '55 to take over the Lancia assets and going motor racing with Fangio and winning races, and then Fangio leaving and continuing. Drivers come and go at Ferrari. And I think if you start hiring a driver because you want to enhance your brand and increase the value of the shares, then that is the wrong reason to be signing a racing driver. I know Lewis pretty well, and I know he'll do a really good job there, and I'm very happy for him. It sounds patronizing, but obviously I'm delighted that I imagine in his mind he's thinking, wow, I can finish my racing career at Ferrari. I'm going to love the pasta, love the road cars, love the red, love this, love that. And he's going to have, he's probably buy a house down there, whatever he'll do, and he'll love it all, and he'll make the most of it. And it's a great thing for Formula One. But there's also the side which is motor racing and humanity, and it's wrong. It's wrong what is happening to Carlos Sainz, and he doesn't deserve that. And he's still driving unbelievably well. And to see him, in a Williams next year is going to be so disappointing, I think.
Oof. I don't disagree, Peter. As we
I just hope he's in a Red Bull. I mean, it's not too late. And if you imagine Max and Carlos now in a Red Bulls, a really good team.
Oh,
and regardless of everything I've said or anybody else has said, if you're in the cold light of Monday morning, you've got to be thinking, what was Sergio Perez doing this weekend? He was nowhere.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Go on, let's talk to Checo. Let's talk to Checo, because I feel like there's been a lot of chatter about the reason why they kept him was for him to... You don't get rid of a Checo Perez before Singapore and Baku. Like, the timing is all wrong, right? You leave him in situ, see how he performs at his favourite 2 tracks. And okay, so he's good at Baku, but Singapore was very disappointing. The rumour, the word on the F1 curb, if indeed that's something that you're invested in, is that he potentially will retire next week at the Mexican Grand Prix, that they wanted to get rid of him, but they were advised by Liberty. You've just had this fantastic documentary that comes out, and a brilliant advert, as was Drive to Survive, for Formula One, Checo Perez overcoming adversity. I think the documentary was called No Te Rindas, Cabrón, which is a brilliant name and a fantastic story, not just from Checo's perspective, but from Formula One. And they didn't want to, Liberty Media didn't want Red Bull to get rid of Checo on the same day when this documentary comes out, because the optics are all wrong. So the rumour is that they will advise Checo to take his retirement, take his leave, race his last race even at the Mexican Grand Prix next week. Brilliant story. Homecoming hero, goes away, rides off into the distance, and then they potentially replace Liam Lawson with Isaac Hadjar or Lindblad, and then I don't know if Lindblad's got the super license points though, to be fair, but I think Hadjar does, and then promotes Liam Lawson to the seat alongside Max Verstappen. Would that be your move if you could?
No, I'd leave Liam at V-carb, and I would put Carlos Sainz in the other car. Definitely. Definitely. And the deal's there to be done for sure. And because Williams have got Colapinto, they can put straight in. And I think it's a huge loss for Formula One if Colapinto is not racing next year. And I think a lot of people will see that, and there'll be a lot of pressure for that to happen. And yeah, for me, it's I mean, all that stuff about Netflix and the whole new stuff coming out is it's just the same as saying, oh, yeah, it's important for Ferrari to have the shares going up and stakeholders, Lewis Hamilton. It's unimportant in the overall picture of things, which is going motor racing. That's what we're doing here. We're going motor racing. We're not trying to get share prices up. We're not trying to sell brands globally. We're not trying to have the biggest TV show on the planet Earth. We're just going motor racing. That's how I see Formula One life, I'm afraid. And in that sense, the logical thing is for Carlos Sainz to drive for Red Bull next year and to have Franco Colapinto full-time in the Williams next year, and for Liam Lawson to be racing full-time alongside Yuki Tsunoda.
Oof.
What's wrong with any of that? Isaac Hadjar's got a lot of future. He doesn't need to be in Formula One next year. And from Red Bull's point of view, they've ticked all the boxes. They've got Liam there. They've got Carlos Sainz alongside Max. What a great combination. Nothing to be complaining about there. But right now, all that stuff about, all that the great story of Sergio Perez coming from nowhere. I mean, from my point of view, he was always there. I'm not quite sure where the struggle, obviously right at the beginning. But if they want to do that story, let's do Nigel Mansell, please. Sergio Perez has had an easy ride compared with Nigel Mansell. Oof. So, when's that going to happen?
Yeah, it's a very good shout, that. And I don't disagree with you as far as Checo. I mean, I suppose I play devil's advocate for a second. I suppose he was nearly out of F1, very nearly didn't have a seat. His Carlos Slim sponsorship money pretty much saved the Force India.
Yeah, but that's only because he didn't do as well as he should have done in various situations, as well as Nigel did when he was given the big opportunity. It's nothing to do with feeling sorry for him. Yeah. And the only thing, as I've said, when all this talk came up about Perez being fired or retiring, the only problem for Red Bull is the 40 or so million he gets from the Mexican economy that he's generated around himself. And that he should be given, really, that's what the Netflix story should be. It should be about how one driver has managed to generate all this money out of one country. More money than even Pastor Maldonado got out of Venezuela.
Wow.
I say that rather cynically, but you see where I'm coming from. And, that's a big story. That a driver who obviously was not wealthy in his own right in terms of his family has managed to generate and create this massive industry in his own country. That's a great story. And that's the story it should be. And that's the story that's compelling and difficult to turn your back on if you're Red Bull, because the numbers actually are real. So that's the thing. And if they do run Carlos Sainz, they're minus a large chunk of money. And they're going to have to pay him. Well, not pay him very much. I mean, if they said to Carlos tomorrow, sorry, mate, we can only afford 2 mil, but we want to put you in the car alongside Max, what's he going to say? Yeah, please tell me. I'll pay you. So, yeah. But if I was Carlos now, I'd be talking to Helmut Marko even as we speak.
Oof. And he probably might be. There was a rumor that he had an option in his contract that should a seat come up at either Red Bull or Mercedes, that he could null and void his contract with Williams even before he turns a wheel next year. So
yeah, I know. But even without that, I mean, you got the might of Red Bull paying whatever it takes to Williams. Williams would take the money to run Colapinto and put the budget in for Colapinto. Brilliant! What a great deal for them.
Wow, Carlos Sainz to Red Bull, Peter.
That's the logical thing. I'm not saying it'll happen, of course. Usually, when it's logic, they go the other way, don't they, in Formula One?
Well, I don't know, Peter. You might not bite 1,000, but with some of these calls, if past this prologue, you some would say Nostradamus Windsor as opposed to
well,
Peter.
Not this weekend. I think I predicted
Oscar.
George and Oscar. I think I also said Ferrari will have a good weekend. The car will be good around there. I think I did say that, so I can at least claim that. But I did say I thought Oscar really pushed me into a win. And not wanting to state the obvious, I said probably Oscar. But I was very disappointed with Oscar, as he was with himself, I guess. So
yeah. Go on then. Finally, Mr. Windsor, as we round third base, it feels like it's the rookie era, and it feels like it's been a bit of a paradigm shift over the past 2 or 3 months as far as F1's concerned. I feel like team principals up and down the grid would have trusted a Kevin Magnussen over a Colapinto or a Nico Hulkenberg over an Ollie Behrman. Up until you put Ollie Behrman in the car, superseding one Carlos Sainz Jr. when he goes and has his appendicitis surgery. And then all of a sudden, everybody realises that, blimey, these F2 guys might have what it takes. And again, they start promoting them. What do you think of Colapinto and Lawson's drive? Lawson, again, did the one-stop brilliant drive. Colapinto beats his teammate yet again. What do you think? Why are these rookies able to just jump in the car with very little prep, little to no preparation, and hold their own against much more grizzled F1 vets, which with, as you say, much more road dust. Almost instantly. How and why, Peter?
Yeah, wasn't it a lovely moment when he passed Alonso as well? Alonso having called him an idiot the day before.
Yes.
We were all cheering at that point, weren't we? Um, and then he finished what, 4 or 5 places ahead of him on the end.
Yeah.
I know Fernando had his problems, but you don't go around calling guys like Liam Lawson an idiot without having some karma, I think.
Wow.
And why are they so good? Because they're good. I mean, we're not seeing anything different from the norm, to be honest. Ever since very talented young drivers have come into Formula One, they've always been quick and they've always done their thing. Think Jochen Rindt, think Ronnie Peterson, think Piers Courage. There's a number of drivers, probably 30, 40. I could give you good examples of young drivers who've come in and instantly taken it right to the main players. And everybody said, wow, amazingly good. But I mean, think about it simply. Jim Clark said, you don't know a circuit in 4 laps, you shouldn't be a racing driver. That's one thing he used to say. And two was, if you're not at the limit of the car, really within a dozen laps, you shouldn't be a racing driver. So these guys are good. I think there's more. I think what we're actually seeing is more drivers getting into a position where they can show their talent, and that's quite a good thing. The problem Formula One still has is the limited number of seats versus the great talent that's out there. I don't think the sims or the feeder system, the ladder system is necessarily the credit side for this. I think it obviously is a good thing. That is what we have, but it's a good driver is a very good driver, and they always have been. And I just think Liam Lawson would have been if he's around in the 70s, he would have done the same thing as Ignacio Giunzi, who finished fourth in his first Grand Prix. And if Franco Colapinto was around in 1972, he probably would have been vying with Carlos Reutemann for the EPF money. He's really good, So I don't think it's any more than that. We shouldn't make any more of it than that. And I suppose on the other side of the coin, we should appreciate that a lot of drivers are now staying around much longer than they ever did in the history of Formula One. And that's why we're seeing these young guys showing them up so quickly, because there are a lot of young, older guys there who are well past their sell-by date may not be in terms of physical talent in the car, but it might well be in terms of motivation, what gets them out of bed in the morning. And dare I say, to use the phrase of Mario Andretti, burning ambition. And that's something that is very difficult to keep if you've been in Formula One for a while and you're a bit of a star and you've made a lot of money on your merchandise through Netflix and people love you whenever you say anything and they listen to whatever you say and wow, there's a billboard of me, even though I haven't even won a race yet. And all this stuff. I mean, I've got security guards with me. I haven't won a race. I've got 3 team people and 2 security guard people with me just to go to the paddock club. Isn't this great? Aren't I important? All that stuff adds up. And all of a sudden, a young guy comes up who's been sleeping on the floor of his best mate in some little house in Snetterton for the last 3 years. He's been given an opportunity. And what's he going to do? He's going to blow this fat Formula One bloke, I say fat euphemistically, away, isn't he? Because there's too much crud around them. They're too famous. There's too much money. There's too many people saying, oh, yeah, you got to do this, you got to do that. Don't do that. Don't talk to him. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's just that the life is too packaged to be raw, hungry racing drivers anymore, unless they're super, super good. And I don't think Lewis has ever fallen into that trap, even though he's a 7 times world champion. I don't think he's fallen into that trap. And I keep saying one of the great things about Lewis Hamilton is that he is still just a hungry Ryehouse Carter that wants to get out there and go motor racing. That's a great. Max Verstappen for sure is in that category. And I think Charles Leclerc, very different history, very different background, but I think he's there too. He's just a pure driver, wants to drive that race car. Carlos Sainz, very, very uncluttered as well in the way he goes racing. Sergio Perez, the opposite. He's nothing but corporate this, corporate that, Mexico this, Mexico that, and that's why he's confused as a human being and as a racing driver as to what he's doing. And George, I don't think is there yet, but there's a lot of stuff around George now, and a bit too much posing for Tommy Hilfiger and not quite enough being George Russell looking disheveled and dirty-handed. I'd like to see a little bit more of the old George out there, I think. But again, that sounds pretty, pretentious. But you see the point I'm trying to make. And then it's worse in the midfield, to be honest, because all those guys who normally nobody really would have cared about, they're all superstars because of Netflix. And that's made them easy prey for the young guys who are not yet superstars on Netflix, for the
Oh,
Colapintos, for the Liam Lawsons.
wow.
Every time you see a Yuki Tsunoda with fans waving at him and cheering him or whatever he's got, or bodyguards, or not necessarily just him, but maybe Kevin Magnussen. Every time a guy like Liam Lawson sees that, he thinks, yes, now I'm going to go in and do my job. I'll let him deal with all that rubbish. I'm going to just go and blow him away on the track.
Wow.
And yeah, what a job they're doing. And there'll be more. If you put Hadjar in that car, if you put Frederick Vesti in that car, if you put Teo Pourchaire in that car, if you put Felipe Drugovich in a quick car, there's so much talent out there. We're just scratching the surface of how many good young guys there are. And as I say, the solution to that is to have another championship for these guys, and to have a proper B division Formula One championship where they're all racing cars built by the Formula One teams, but they're running it with their own operations, and they've got their own championship, their own platform for television and sponsorship, and they're going to different countries, different circuits, running their own B division Formula One World Championship endorsed by Liberty. That's what should be happening, and that's when we have another tier, and those guys are all racing, 10 times a year, whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's what should happen.
It's hard, some say, Peter, to wake up at 6 a.m. and go and train when you're sleeping in silk pajamas. Very famous saying from a boxer called Marvin Hagler, and I think that's what you're talking to, right? When these guys get too much fame, it goes to their head, and they're not hungry, young racing drivers as they once were.
Yeah, I'm not saying they don't work hard, and I'm not saying they're not afraid to get up at 5 a.m. I just think the emphasis on what they're doing in their day changes, and all of a sudden, being a star and living up to the platform you've created for yourself on social media takes your time, as distinct from Liam Lawson, which is, what am I going to do when I get back into a Formula One car? How am I going to drive it? What am I, that's all he's thinking about. Hungry as a dog, but not worrying about his public persona or what people are saying about him on Facebook or whatever, or, Twitter, and just being a racing driver. And yet all these guys in Formula One, it's thrown at them. You use the Netflix thing. Oh, the importance of Netflix. Well, it is important, but it's only a TV show. It's not motor racing. It's not what actually makes the world go round in terms of Formula One laps of a circuit, braking points, turning in points, feeling the grip, feeling the dynamic load. It's none of those things. It's all other stuff. And I think the minute you're in Formula One for more than, say, 6 months, you get drawn like a magnet to all of that, and it sucks away some of your burning ambition.
The business of the sport that we call F1, Peter, is becoming increasingly commercial, isn't it? And again, we could argue between now and forever whether that's good or bad for the sport. Listen, Peter, as a final one, let me ask you this, because we talked about rookie drivers. I'm going to read some names out to you. Why don't you give me 2 names that you would sign for your team if indeed you had your pick of the litter? Felipe Drugovich, Teo Pourchaire, Franco Colapinto, Jack Doohan, Lawson, Ollie Behrman, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, and Isaac Hadjar. Sign 2 of them for me, Peter.
I can't do that. There's too many already. I'm not very good at that. I would have to, no, I can't. I couldn't do that, because, Drugovich definitely is super quick. They're all very quick, and it depends on a number of things. I'd like to sign them all, manage them all, and then I'd operate the ones that weren't racing for my team. I'd make sure they were with proper other teams and properly looked after and focused on what they were going to do. I think that's what should happen there. Everyone you mentioned there is very good. I would have put Vesti in there as well.
Yeah.
And very quiet guy, but very, very good technically, very good. So, and many more still above that, I would put Alex Palou in there. I know he's not a rookie but he's very talented too.
Promising. All of them. We are indeed in the rookie era, Peter. They're all there'll be 5, maybe 6 of them, depending on I didn't even say Bortoletto, look at that. Depending on who makes it into F1 in 2025. Oh gosh, interesting times. And they say F1 is boring, Peter Windsor. Like it is very interesting times, Mr. Windsor.
Who says Formula One's boring? I don't say that.
Well, the Drive to Survive generations say that it can be, but they would have watched yesterday.
Really? Well, why do we care about them? That's just a TV show. That's not
Well,
important,
this is the argument that we're having, Peter. The commerciality of F1, it has to play a part. I
don't think anybody should be allowed to make a comment about Formula One, whether it's boring or interesting or where it should be going in the future, unless they sit in examinations set by you and I, which they've written an examination over 90 minutes, no reference to books or anything, in which we just ask historical questions about Formula One. And if they get more than 80%, then I think they're in a position to make some comment about Formula One's current status and where it might be going in the future. But unless that happens, irrelevant.
I want to agree with you, Peter, but they will leverage the term gatekeeper at us if we bark up that tree. 100%, Peter.
I think when they go through the swipe gates to go into the paddock now, instead of it just going bing bong and your picture comes up, it should have and it should be an algorithmic thing, but it should be a Formula One historical motor racing question comes up, and if you can't answer that question, even though you got the right pass, you don't get in.
Liberty Media would never turn away money like that, Peter. And the joke is, Peter, I would argue that you would have no one at the Grand Prix then, Peter. This is the issue, right? That 40%, genuinely 40%.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? As Bernie said, we don't want anybody at the Grand Prix. It's just a TV audience anyway. You can make a TV show without anybody in the studio.
Well, 40% of the people currently watching, Peter, have come into F1 since 2021. COVID, the gangbuster season between Max and Lewis, and of course, Drive to Survive. But
they're watching it. But 99% are watching it on TV. They're not watching it at the racetracks.
Yeah, 100% of it. But
that's all I'm saying. If they don't get into the paddock area with their bing bong, then does it really matter? That's all I'm saying.
Well, 10,000.
Or the circuit, for that matter. As I say, Bernie always said, I don't want any spectators at the circuit. They're noisy and smelly and everything else, and we'll just make the circuit nice and clean and white.
Take it. Blimey, Peter, you've been a legend as always. That's so generous with your time. If you enjoy Peter Windsor's god tier level of insight, go and subscribe to that fella's YouTube channel, Peter Windsor. If you enjoy listening on podcast platforms, you can go and check him out on the Short Corners podcast on any decent podcasting platform. As always, I've been your boy Cameron. Be sure to smash a like, comment, subscribe, por favor. If you're listening to this on a podcasting platform, follow and 5-star reviews, por favor. Every little bit helps. From Peter D. Windsor, I've been your boy Cameron. I will see you on the next one. Between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare.